News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the news today. We begin the latest firestorm caused by Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump, who called for an end to Muslims entering the United States in the aftermath of the San Bernardino mass shooting. Trump's latest controversial comments drew swift condemnation from across the board, including from his Republican rivals, the White House, as well as Muslims and non-Muslims worldwide. I-24 News correspondent Shai Ben-Ari reports.
Those following the race for the Republican nomination have by now come to expect outspoken rhetoric from Donald Trump. But a statement released by his campaign Monday, followed by comments at a rally, still managed to shock.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on. You have no choice.
When asked if the proposed ban would apply not only to immigrants, but also to Muslim visitors to the U.S., Trump's campaign manager replied, everyone. Trump also addressed the issue of Muslims already living in the United States.
But yes, we have to look at mosques. We have no choice. We have to see what's happening. Because something is happening in there. Man, there's anger.
Leaders of the American Muslim community responded with outrage.
Donald Trump sounds more like a leader of a lynch mob than a great nation like ours. This rhetoric echoes the policies enacted by Nazi Germany against the Jews. Have we learned anything from history, Mr. Trump?
Trump's comments were also denounced by other presidential candidates, including his rivals for the Republican nomination. But perhaps more significantly, they were also rejected by Republicans already holding office.
Normally, I do not comment on what's going on in the presidential election. I will take an exception today. This is not conservatism. What was proposed yesterday is not what this party stands for, and more importantly, it's not what this country stands for.
In his statement, Trump cited a poll alleging that 25% of American Muslims support violence against their fellow citizens. The poll was conducted by the Center for Security Policy, a think tank run by Frank Gaffney, a right-wing extremist known for his support of various conspiracy theories. Trump tied his controversial proposal to the San Bernardino shooting last week, which killed 14 people, and was carried out by a Muslim couple which Islamic State named as supporters. Fox News reported Tuesday a deposit of $28,500 was made into the account of Syed Farouk, the husband, from webbank.com, about 2 weeks before the shootings. The report said investigators are exploring whether the deposit was a loan, which could suggest premeditation. In most recent polls, Donald Trump has maintained a healthy lead over all other Republican candidates, despite a string of previous controversies. Many are wondering whether this latest storm could be a turning point.
And with me here in the studio is Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States and Knesset member for the Kulanu Party. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Always great to be with you, Lucy.
Michael, what is this? You are a citizen of the United States.
I was. They took it away from me before I became ambassador. It's okay. I still have the accent, believe me. Yes.
And, you know, I'm trying to understand what is happening to the American people, what is happening to the American voters, that when they are hearing Donald Trump saying what he's saying, they're just applauding him and saying, okay, this is what we want.
Whatever the reasons. Okay. Whether it's fear, Islamophobia, it's thoroughly unacceptable. And listen, I'm a member of Knesset here. I'm not in the United States. It's very important for Israelis to stand up against this. You know, precisely because we're Israelis, precisely we're facing threats from radical Islam. We have to stand up for the vast majority of Muslims who aren't radical. I spent during the period in Washington, I worked with imams. I invited them to the embassy. We had an iftar every year, breaking the Ramadan fast. These are wonderful people, and to stigmatize and derogate and criminalize an entire population is thoroughly unacceptable. You know, support for Israel, Lucy, in the United States is at an all-time high. 70% of Americans define themselves as pro-Israel. But I knew as ambassador that a certain percentage of that, 70%, were people who support Israel because they don't like Muslims. And I would go out in front of the audience, and I'll say it on TV tonight. If that's why you like Israel, we don't want your support. If that's the price, we don't want it. And it's 20% of our population here is Muslim as well, partially a Muslim country. We have to stand up against this.
You know, I'm looking at the American media today, and each and every channel that I'm opening, each and every front page that I'm seeing is talking about this. And you know, every publicity or bad publicity is a good publicity. Every headline that he's getting is just taking him up in this road more and more in the polls, like in numbers that you cannot even believe. And I'm asking myself, after him joking on women, after him joking on disabilities, after him saying what he's saying about Muslims, will he be able to pass this also, and he will be ahead in the polls again?
Well, anything's possible in American politics. Some things are possible in Israeli politics as well. Donald Trump represents a sort of a deep malaise within the American electorate, and it may not be about Muslims per se. It's about people being fed up with the status quo, with the system, with political correctness. There's a lot of sort of resentment at Washington and what it represents, the establishment. So at a certain point, that may be a breaking point. If you look at previous elections at this time, in 2012, 2008, the people who were the front runners, you don't even remember their names anymore. So things can change very quickly in politics there, and I hope this would be a turning point.
You know, let's go back to 2008. 2008, he tried his luck running to the presidency of the United States. Everybody thought that it was a joke, and it ended up as a joke. This time when he went in to this race, everybody talked about this will last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, like maximum. And we're seeing that this is a serious deal. This is a serious matter. And I'm asking myself, what changed between 2008 to 2015? Barack Obama?
I think America's changed. And there was something I always come back and tell Israeli leaders, this is not the America you remembered from the 70s and 80s. It's a much more dynamic country and much more, in many ways, unfocused country. Look what happened in the aftermath of the San Bernardino attack. And the Democrats immediately came out and called for gun control. It was about gun control.
Yes.
1 billion guns in the United States, 3 for every citizen. It's quite extraordinary. That's just the legal guns, by the way. And as opposed to Israel, it's only have 3% private guns. But the Republicans came out and attacked radical Islam and the fact that the president hadn't actually used those words. So you have a population that's divided even on what happened in San Bernardino, with whether this was a gun incident or a radical Islam incident. America is going through the throes of some very deep crises of identity, of purpose, of focus. And it's therefore, I think it's, again, I'll take it back to us, to Israel, because we are fighting an enemy who's stabbing us in the streets.
Yes.
And they are guided by a radical form of Islam. But it's very important for Israelis to say that this is not what Islam is about. And we have many citizens who are, vast majority of our citizens, who wouldn't support this, who would condemn this. So that's very important.
I want to take it from this point because I want to join to this conversation. Nida Khan, she is with us on the phone, freelance journalist in the United States. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us again.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, Anita, let's try to talk what Islam is. You know, everybody's talking about Islamophobia. Everybody's talking about the comments of Donald Trump. I asked you last time, is there Islamophobia in the United States? And unfortunately, the answer is yes, because of terror attacks, because of 100,000 reasons. But we are seeing that there's someone that's just getting into this vacuum and just making this monster even bigger.
Absolutely. And, you know, while terrorism is an absolute reality, and so is gun violence, both of those things are reality. The problem is that you have individuals like Donald Trump who use these fear tactics to drum up support from their base, to raise money, to get higher in the polls, and for whatever his political purposes may be, for his own self-aggrandizement. But in the process, you're completely, you know, creating an environment that's just toxic. And what's really, really sad is the fact that so many of his supporters actually believe this. You know, one of the major networks here interviewed, they did men on the street interviews at his event last night, asking whether or not they agreed with the fact that he said Muslims should be banned, and a large percentage of them said that they do. And then when you have that sort of mentality that's seeping into people's minds, it plays out in very, very real ways, whether it's overt acts of attacks on Muslims or more subliminal ways of either discriminating against them or even, other avenues that can still have deadly consequences. I actually wrote a very personal piece last week in the Huffington Post about how my own father, about a decade ago, he was hit by a car and had a horrible accident as he was walking as a pedestrian, and just the anti-Muslim environment led to shoddy police work, discrimination, and a whole bunch of other things that eventually led to his death. So it has very, very real consequences when you spew this sort of hatred and anti-Muslim rhetoric.
Nita, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Muslim community in the United States, maybe it's not even defining itself as a Muslim community. They, first and foremost, they're defining themselves as Americans, like any other citizen of the United States. They see themselves as Americans, then they see the rest. Is it changing in the last few months or in the last few years that people are defining themselves, first of all, maybe as their religion and then as part of a country?
I don't think so, and I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I think one can absolutely be a Muslim American, but and those things are actually go together. That's how I define myself too. I'm a Muslim American. I'm a Pakistani American. It's not that those two things are opposed to one another. And at the end of the day, Muslims are in all facets of society. The president, even in his Oval Office address the other day, made that point, which is great. But what I would even challenge our president to do, especially in this sort of climate right now, is to actually maybe go and visit a mosque to really stand with the Muslim community to say that, no, we're not, denouncing all of you. We stand with you. We know that you work with us to root out terrorism, because even President Bush visited a mosque post 9/11, and this president has yet to do so. And I think that would really speak volumes to Trump and other people who are putting out this sort of rhetoric and anti-Muslim sentiment.
Yes, Nita Khan, thank you very much for this conversation. I want to take you, Michael, to one of our conversations when we spoke about minority here in Israel, about the feelings of Israeli Arabs here, how they feel and how they feel always maybe persecuted, maybe racism against the Israeli Arab community. And there is a certain feeling that sometimes you asked me once, how does it feel? I told you there is a big difference between being a minority among a majority and being a minority among minorities like the United States. Do you think that this will change the feeling of somebody who's feeling part of a country in the United States? That everybody's coming from a lot of places and they feel part of something is going to change?
I think if I have to put myself in the position of an American Muslim like Nita.
Or an American Jew.
Or American Jew. American Jews, throughout our history, Jews in general, were the victims of generalizations, of racism, discrimination. In 1924, the United States closed its gates to immigration from Russia because of the Red Scare. They were afraid they were communists, and they were afraid that the Jews were coming in to be communists. So we were victims of precisely what Mr. Trump is calling for closing the gates to immigration on the basis of a racial or religious identity. So we know what it feels like. And one of the reasons I moved to Israel was because I grew up in a neighborhood where I was the only Jewish kid, and I got beat up every day for being Jewish. And I wanted to come in once in my life being a part of a majority. But I don't want to be part of a majority that in any way discriminates or is prejudicial toward its minorities. And I think the litmus test of this democracy, the Jewish and democratic states, is how we treat the people who are not Jewish in the state. And I think that's been the litmus test of the Jewish people throughout history.
Yes, definitely. Michael Oren, always a pleasure having you here. Thank you very much. Thanks.